Whether or not you're a fan, it's hard to deny that From Software's Soulsborne series have had quite a bit of influence in the gaming industry. Their quality and success have inspired several to replicate those same qualities while trying to add their own twist into the formula, creating a new subgenre named the Souls-like. And placing its blade on the roundtable of Souls-like, Thymesia has made its entry into the group. Having said that, I would have really loved to talk about how this game has done in comparison to its predecessors, but unfortunately, I haven't played any of those, so here I am bringing the next best thing, a review of Thymesia. And yes, one more disclaimer, I know a lot of people call it Thymesia, but I'm gonna be calling it Thymesia. Excuse me for that. Now, unlike the other Souls-like, Thymesia took its inspiration from Sekiro and Bloodborne. With a parry system and a quick-step dodge, with fewer iframes and healing enemies, the game decided to emphasize more on aggressive play. Players leave wounds on enemies with their attacks, which if given some breathing space, will heal up. Now this may sound tedious, but the game does give us enough tools to deal with it easily. Our player character, Corvus, is equipped with a sword and a dagger, which cannot be changed throughout the game, just like in Sekiro. However, that is not to say that the player will be spamming one attack string in between sequence of parries. The game has a system of plague weapons which is made available for one-time use, again, by attacking enemies in a specific way. Furthermore, playing long enough grants the player an option to equip 2 plague weapons of their choice, which they can use anytime provided they have enough of this green bar, which again fills up by damaging enemy wounds. Apart from the basic combat mechanics, the game also fashions a well-diverse collection of skill trees, which gives quite a few options to pursue in terms of builds. And the best part, we can reset any skill tree anytime we want without any cost. So if you do not like a particular skill that you bought, you don't need to worry about it at all. Just reset and reallocate. These systems might sound a bit overwhelming, but it isn't too complex really, and the tutorial section does a good job teaching all these systems. To be honest, I found myself comboing enemies out of their plague-ridden bodies in just a little over an hour into the game. Honestly, looking how amazing the combat is, I feel like in some alternate timeline, this game fashions some aerial combos and a style meter. Now, with such a commendable combat system in place, it would have been a great disappointment if the bosses were subpar, but thankfully, the devs made a fine roster of bosses to clash our swords against. There were 2 bosses that were unimpressive, but the good ones are just too good to complain. Difficulty wise, I won't say they are at the level of From Software games, but they still are very enjoyable to fight against. They were good enough to warrant the time I spent doing the parts of the game I did not like. Which brings in the section of negative sections of the game. Sadly enough, the fun combat experience is the only thing that the game does right, and even there, I have one small complaint. But before going to that, let's talk about the story and settings. The game is set in the plague-ridden kingdom of Hermes, following the story of Corvus as he scours through his memories in search for a cure. For Corvus, that's all I got in addition to one other fact which really doesn't add much in terms of story and lore. The world definitely captures the atmosphere required for the game, but it never really encapsulated me into it. Again, the environment did capture the essence of the world, but it wasn't exactly too pleasing to the eyes. Of course, a plague-ridden world needs to be like that, but if From Software can make a dying world pleasing to look at, Overboarders surely could have done a bit more for Thymesia. Visuals aside, even in terms of gameplay, the level does not have much to offer, with a lack of clever placement of enemies and only fruit of exploration being unlocking shortcuts, which to be honest, never really felt too significant. Now, in terms of enemy placement, the game wasn't totally bad and even had 1 or 2 instances of good challenging scenarios, but I wish it was even better. Furthermore, in terms of enemy design, it was really lacking. Mostly knights and crazy farmers with buffed and mini boss variants of the same, toss into non-humans and the roster is completed. Most of them are seen in the first level itself, and apart from that, the enemy models are such that some of the enemy attacks are difficult to see. In a fast-paced game that revolves around deflection, that's not something that should happen. However, good thing is that it happened like that with only 2 enemy types, which are not very common. And lastly, the most egregious thing of the game, its repetitiveness. Repeating enemies of course is a thing, but I'm not really too bothered by that. They are fun to fight against, but repeating entire levels in the name of side quest is unacceptable. The game only has 5 unique levels, out of which 1 is a straight up boss fight, so the number of levels is pretty low for the price point. And 3 of those levels are such that I need to repeat them again to complete some side quests with no proper rewards. It definitely contributes to the different endings, but that reason is not sufficient to justify this gameplay loop. Luckily though, as I said earlier, there were quite a few good bosses at the end of these reruns. Thymesia's selling point is without a doubt its combat. From what I've experienced, this is a fine twist put on Sekiro's combat system to say the least. But unfortunately, level design and enemy design up to a certain extent did not do it justice. It's still quite a good game though, if we look at it as a whole package, but I'd like to see the devs get some funds and scope to see what they can make. I see a lot of potential here. But talking specifically about Thymesia, it's good, but not for the price point. Taking all these things into consideration, I rate Thymesia a humble 7 out of 10. This is for this one. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, please do hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. We have more contents planned out and will be coming out, mainly podcasts about big games, major games. And with all that said, one last time, thank you for watching. This is the Rando Rookie from the Indian Gaming Podcast, signing off.